Our next talk is very much related to user awareness as well. We have Sarah James from Layer 8, from compliance to cultural change, basically describing user behaviors. I hope you enjoy the talk.
So according to social media, we all have a posh parliamentary name. And mine is Ellen Stoke-Hinchcliffe. Nice to meet you. Now, if you don't know what your posh parliamentary name is, you can put it together really easily by following these 3 steps. Take your grandparents' first name, take the street name that you grew up on, and your head teacher's surname. So for me, that's Ellen Stoke-Hinchcliffe. I'll just pause for a moment whilst you find out what your posh parliamentary name is. So of course my real name is Sarah James, and I am owner and founder at Layer 8, a company dedicated to creating champions of security culture. Now the interesting thing about that exercise is no matter where I do it, whether it's with non-security people or security people, I always get really good engagement. And of course, that is giving away some quite interesting information that perhaps is used to recover passwords or set up bank details. So what I want to look at today is, why do we do it? What's happening at that point in our brains when we are attracted to the honeypot, or when we make the decision to click on a suspicious link? And I'm going to talk through how just a little bit of science can move our awareness programs from purely compliance-based to culture and behaviour change. So I don't know about you, but I have been in security for quite a long time, and I often feel like I'm stuck in this perpetual loop of looking at the risks and threats, advising on best advice and guidance and best practice, only to see no change in security behaviour. And this stat starts to break down why that might be happening. What it's telling us is that the average time from opening a suspicious email to clicking on the link is less than 10 seconds. Less than 10 seconds. I mean, that's not even enough time to read the email, let alone go through all the checks that we ask people to do, hovering over the link, checking where the domain name is, looking for clues in how the email has been written. What's happening here is that actually that data is not going through to our rational decision-making part of our brain. It can't be, because it's happening too quick. The response has been automated by a part of our brain, the feeling brain, without us actually processing that data. So if we have a look at the brain in a little more detail, in basic terms, we have 3 parts of the brain that's controlling our memory. We have our ancient reptilian part of our brain. That's just doing stuff for us. It's helping me stand, breathe, my hair grow, things that I'm not really conscious of. Then we have our limbic system. Our limbic system is our feeling part of the brain, where we experience joy and pride, where we get angry, where we feel sad. And then we have our neocortex, the part of our brain that really sets us apart as human beings. And this is the part of the brain where we process complex data, where our skills and knowledge are developed, where we think about things consciously, and we have great technological and scientific advancements. But I want to dive into the limbic system in a little more detail, because the limbic system is responsible for a lot of our people problems, as we might call them. First of all, in our limbic system, it's where our fight or flight responses come from. We have this tiny little piece called the amygdala, which does these things called amygdala hijacks. Now, I don't know if you have heard of an amygdala hijack, but if you haven't, I'm sure you will have felt one. It's that gut-wrenching, sicky, horrible feeling that you get when something bad or unexpected or unusual happens. It's what makes you either freeze, run 100 miles in the other direction, or get up close and want to fight. The reason that I know we will have all experienced one of these at some point in our life is if you've got kids, they can do it to you, can't they? Road rage, for example, we respond and our passengers are left thinking, that was a bit of an overreaction, wasn't it? Well, of course, they didn't feel it the same way we did. The response is automated. It hasn't processed because in our rational mind, we perhaps wouldn't have behaved like that. The limbic system is also where our happy hormones sit. And whilst these have the opposite effect on our feeling, the joy, the pride, the social bonds, they are also being processed in a part of our brain that automates the response. But gone are the days where those rewards came from hunting down our next meal and catching a really good meal for tonight's dinner. Now, our rewards come in the form of those little red notifications, the friend requests, the offers for discount vouchers. And we are so conditioned to seek reward that we constantly put ourselves in harm's way, constantly scrolling to see, have people liked that post I just put up? Have people responded to my email? What's the best discount that I can get on tonight's dinner? So, do we blame our employees for making these decisions, for doing these things that they perhaps wouldn't do in their rational mind? I don't think we can, because we have to remember this is happening at a subconscious level. Our job in security is to retrain our habits and behaviours so that our automated response is a proactive, secure response. We need to slow down that piece of information enough so that it can pass through our limbic system and reach our neocortex, where we can process it with our conscious, rational thinking mind. And if we do that enough, through triggers, actions, and rewards constantly repeating themselves, habits can be formed. Now, there's a lot of conversation in the security world about how we can create secure habits and behaviours. And today, I want to focus on conversation, how we can use conversation as our catalyst for behaviour change. Let's stop and think about conversation for a moment. Conversation is so rich. Conversation can give us context. Conversation can give us meaning. Conversation allows us to ask questions and make things relevant to us. So I want to talk you through a blueprint, a process with 6 steps in it for engaging employees and people right across your business in really good quality conversations about security. Because essentially what we're trying to do here is we're trying to create champions of security. So what do I mean by a champion of security? I mean a person who has the passion to protect your business and the people in it. People who are able to facilitate the discussion right from the grassroots of the business between security and what's happening in their local function, developing the right processes to set up supplier relationships, for example, or hire and recruit new people. Now, a champion of security could be anyone. It might take the form of an official security champions network, which is becoming very popular in organisations. However, champions of security need to exist right within your security team, people who can facilitate those conversations. Champions of security need to exist at senior leadership level as well, people who can sponsor security and really believe in the importance and the difference that it will make to a business's future. So let me talk you through those 6 steps for creating champions of security. Principle number 1, a champion of security needs to be able to have courageous conversations. Because actually behaviours and change, they're socially constructed. And what I mean by that is I mean that we change through the interactions that we have, the conversations we have with people, by trying things out and making mistakes, by collaborating, for example. I don't know about you, but I don't think we change by just reading a policy. An example here is, for example, diet and health. Now, we've probably all read on Public Health England that diet and exercise are good for you. But does that mean we change? No. It's why things like diet groups and sports clubs are so great, because they allow people to come together and talk about things, hold each other accountable, find ways that work for each other. So the first principle is about secure behaviours being created in a socially constructed way. The second principle, champions of security are able to amplify strengths. When we take the time to look at what our organisation or our team already does really well, the moments when it absolutely excels, we can ask ourselves, why is that? What are the core life-giving factors that make that possible? What sits on top of just turning up to work to collect the paycheck? Because once we know what those strengths are, we can ask how we can utilise them to strengthen our security culture. Choosing to use things that people already do well means that it gives them confidence and a belief that they have the ability to change. So an example of this might be, imagine you turn up to a new job and on the very first day, your boss says to you, "Welcome to the team, Sarah. Things work a little bit differently around here, so it might take a while to get to know the people and the processes. Good luck." Or your new boss could say to you, "Welcome to the team. We picked you because you've got excellent communication and relationship building skills. That's really going to help you with developing and finding out about our processes and people." The first focuses on something that's not there, a deficit, a weakness. The second takes a skill that that person already possesses and feels confident about and asks them to use that to develop their new behaviour. What opportunities can we find in security to do the same? The third principle, champions of security have a positive focus. And it's true that the more we look for positives, the more we find them. We have a choice about whether to look for things that go well or things that have gone wrong. And actually in security, we're probably trained to look for the weaknesses. But when we look for what goes right, positive thoughts give us positive energy, which can create positive, secure behaviours. So if I asked you, how many times have you done a root cause analysis of a security breach? Versus how many times have you done the root cause analysis of just the day-to-day keeping the business safe and secure? What different things could you find out if you really sat down as a team and analysed why you do things so well, the positives? The fourth principle, champions of security can build trusted relationships. And the more somebody knows a person, the more impactful their conversations will be. I mean, really know somebody, not just what they do as a job role, but their purpose. Let's take, for example, a conversation with HR. You might want to talk to them about protecting some PII data. You find out that the team sifts a lot of CVs. A conversation with them reveals that how they see their purpose is talent acquisition managers, because they are there to recruit, acquire, and retain the very best talent for your business. How different is that conversation now about PII data that you know what their purpose in life is? So a champion of security must be able to communicate and build those trusted relationships with stakeholders right throughout your enterprise. The fourth principle, champions of security can ask better questions. Questions help us understand, and the very first question that we ask sets the tone for the future. Imagine we have a security incident. We could choose our first question to be, what went wrong? Imagine how that might make our team feel. Or we could pick on a strength, like teamwork, and we could choose to ask instead, we have a great team here. I'd like us all to think for a moment about one thing that you can bring to this team and one thing one of your colleagues can bring to this team to help us recover from this breach, even more resilient as a result of it. What difference would that make to the mindset and the confidence of the team going into that incident recovery? And finally, champions of security must present possibility. Again, we're used to in security talking about weaknesses and what goes wrong and talking about the stats of how many breaches have happened. But that doesn't give confidence to people that they can actually do anything to change that. If we use words like people are the weakest link or cyber criminals will always be one step ahead of us, how are we giving confidence to people outside of security that their actions will make a difference? We can choose our words. We can choose to say things like, together, we have a chance of beating the cyber criminals. There was somebody who is really, really famous who had their trash talk, their infamous trash talk. But I always like to talk about Muhammad Ali. He was infamous for saying things like, I'm the world's greatest boxer. He will go down in round 5. The point is, he said it until he believed it. And then he repeated it until everybody else believed it. And still to this day, many people would say Muhammad Ali is the world's greatest boxer. Whether it is factually accurate or not, it drew people to him. It allowed people to believe. So I have a challenge for you. Tomorrow, just listen out to the trash talk that you do when you're talking about security. What about your team? Does it sit mostly on the negative side? Or is it positive? Is it inspiring? Is it developmental? So these 6 principles of our blueprint on creating champions of security and putting security back in the heart of the conversations of the business comes from its roots in something called appreciative inquiry. If anybody wants to Google that, it's AI, but a different AI, appreciative inquiry with an I. And appreciative inquiry is a change model that focuses on collaborative, strength-based change. Now, over the 6 years, we have adapted that principle, those principles, to work within the security community and to create really good champions of security culture. And we've done that through practical implementation within organisations. So what I'd just like to remind you of is that conversation really is our most powerful catalyst for change. So therefore, what question will you ask tomorrow to your colleagues to start a developmental conversation in your business about security? Thank you.
Sarah, thank you very much for the talk. That was really, really good. If anyone has any questions, please send them across. It would be awesome to have a little bit of a discussion. We have one question here. Sarah, quick question. What would be a good question I can ask to get people thinking about security in a different way? Tell us.
Thank you. Well, a question that we often start with when we're doing Security Champions program is, tell me a story about a time you felt alive, engaged, and completely involved in protecting the business. It's so amazing what can come out. I mean, it's funny that we use this word story, because sometimes you think, oh, tell me a story. It sounds a little bit like you're talking to children, but actually, when you ask for a story, people will tell you more than their job description or what they did and the facts and figures. They'll actually start to tell you what they felt about it, what they did, who was working with them, and you start to uncover some of the core strengths that can be used to support the business. The other really interesting, sorry.
And how they felt as well.
And how they felt,
really
exactly.
Because you do a personal connection there, right?
That's so important, because of course change has to happen here, and the great thing about that is there are so many great stories of success. You sort of think, is anybody going to have anything to say? Every time we ask that question, we think, are people going to say, I haven't got anything? But we always find that people have got stories to share, and from that small seed, you can start to create more and more change. You can spread the stories, and from that small seed, yeah, you can begin your culture change.
Very good, very good. We have some other questions here. In particular, one that says, what are the specific pitfalls that security cyber champions might have?
So something that we come across is champions need to be volunteers. Ideally, we have come across some organisations who try to volunteer their champions, which is difficult, because a champion needs to have a passion for the business. They need to be in there for the right reason. The other things that can be challenging for champions is the ability to have conversations with the business. Sometimes they are presented with challenges like, why is this more important than the HR job that you're doing or the finance work that you've got to do? So I think what's really important when you're working with the Champions Network is not just to upskill them in security, but also to give them the communication and communication skills that can enable them to facilitate those discussions with the business.
Awesome, awesome. We have something related here that I find very insightful. So another question is, what are the specific pitfalls that cyber champions may encounter, but specifically related with different kinds of peoples, introvert and extrovert, or even different cultures? Things which may work in the UK may not work in other, let's say, Mediterranean countries or Oriental countries. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to running a champions program is to make sure that it's actually driven by your champions rather than prescribed on by the security organisation, which means that you can actually, if you're asking the right questions and getting your champions to lead, then they will make sure that it's done in the right way for their local environment. And you're absolutely right about different kind of personality types within a cultural group. It doesn't mean just because we like champions to have conversations that you can only put yourself forward if you're really confident and like to chat to people all the time. Actually, there are roles that you can perform as a champion that are perhaps a little bit more under the radar, but are still doing as much value as the people who are like to be outspoken.
Awesome, awesome. Really good. Okay, very good. Another question here. how do you get people to really understand why this is all important?
Well, yeah, I think you have to create a compelling reason that's compelling for the business. Obviously, it sort of sounds a little obvious, but through having sort of a number of conversations with stakeholders, people in your peer group, to find out, what's a challenge or a focus that our business is engaged with at the moment that would resonate with everybody. And once you find that, then you can start to identify, well, what's the security perspective that we can put onto that? And then how can security champions help to enable that? I think if you just look at it from your own perspective about what security champions could be, then it's never going to be insightful or interesting to other people in the business. You've got to flick your perspective and see it from their way of thinking.
Yeah, and I would imagine that every business and every situation is slightly different, right? So
sure.
You need to exactly take their lead almost, right?
Exactly,
Very
yeah.
good. Awesome. We don't have any more questions, and we have a few minutes left, but is there anything else that you want to mention to the audience? There seems to be quite a bit of engagement here, so is there any last comment or a remark that you want to share?
Oh, put me on the spot now, but I tell you what, here's something that if you've got another kind of question thing, if you don't want to go into the tell me a story about a time, another one that's a really good kind of tester for how well people will engage is start your next meeting by saying to people, what's the best thing that's happened to you so far today? Just by doing that, you get these different responses. It might be something amazing that you can share a story about that's completely unsecurity related. It could just be, do you know what? I was sat at home, so my partner brought me a cup of tea or coffee, and that was amazing. But it gets people to open up, it starts that piece of relationship building, and it gets people used to having slightly different types of conversations than perhaps they'd be used to.
That reminds me, that's awesome, by the way. That reminds me, Joe Rogan, very often in his interviews, to create this positive spin and to get people passionate talking about what they really like doing, he very often says, hey, if you had $10 million and you quit your job, what would you be doing? Because that really goes into what do you really, really love doing. And everyone loves talking about that, right? Your dreams and the type of thing. No?
Exactly.
Completely unrelated, I know. But
Exactly. The other thing, you can try it with your kids after school at the dinner table. If you say to them normally, what did you do at school today? And they say to you, I don't know, I can't remember, or I've forgotten, which is what my daughter normally says. I ask her that question instead. Excuse me, my dog in the background. I ask her that question instead, and I get a bit better response.
Unpredictable as well, I would imagine, right? With the small kids.
Exactly.
Very good. We are kind of bang on time. Hey, thank you very, very much. That was an awesome discussion. Guys, we are coming to an end. We have a closing note from Ian in just 1 minute time. Thanks, everyone. If you stuck around up until now, you had a lot of spare time or potentially, a lot of interest in incident response. Thank you very, very much. I'll leave closing note to Ian. It's been a pleasure hosting this. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye for now.